Yeah, I'm starting with you. And they're going to be streaming this through CBS. I'll keep it clear for you. Yeah. All right, cool. Thanks, man. Yep.
Thank you for joining us for the annual wildfire briefing. Earlier this morning, we talked about additional plans for the state to increase our preparedness level, given the very high risk of fire in the year ahead. Traditionally, we've talked about a fire season. One thing that's occurring with the increased risk factors are really a year-round fire risk. It was only 2 years ago, summer of 2020, that Colorado experienced the 3 largest wildfires in the entire history of our state. And then just over 4 months ago, we experienced the most destructive fire in the history of our state, the Marshall Fire. Now, of course, wildland fire has always been and always will be part of Colorado's natural ecosystem. But there are several factors that are conspiring to substantially increase the risk. One is the changing climate, drier, hotter weather throughout the year, less precipitation. Second is increased population of the state of Colorado, especially in the wildland-urban interface. And third is increased utilization of our public lands. Many of these fires tragically are caused by human behavior. I got to witness devastation firsthand. Of course, with the Marshall fires, most recently, entire subdevelopments burned out, destroyed, over 1,000 families without their home. Houses that once stood tall, reduced to empty foundations. And of course, we are working on facilitating rebuilding as quickly, as efficiently as possible, doing our best to make sure that we can, on the philanthropic side and the state side, fill in gaps that exist in insurance. Because it's about, of course, a home for families. It's also about the health of communities like Superior, Louisville, incorporated Boulder County. As we see events like the Marshall Fire and the 3 largest fires in the history of our state in 2020, we see these events are not anomalies, but are really harbingers of the future. And that's why Colorado, and of course the country, especially the American West, really needs to up our game to prepare for the year-round fire risk that we now face. That's why last year we made investments to secure a Firehawk helicopter. There is a one out there to view. That's not ours. Our helicopters delivered in early May. We'll then begin the adaptation process, recruitment process. We also are very proud to have the AmeriCorps, the Colorado Climate Corps, and Department of Corrections State Wildland inmate fire crews, adding additional capacity to what existed before. Some Climate Corps members are able to help respond to active wildfires. We're joined by Lieutenant Governor Diane Primavera. The CERB Colorado and Climate Corps are under her office, which will provide additional work and support around risk reduction and mitigation. And just this morning, we joined Senate President Steve Fember to highlight additional funding for aerial response capacity over the next year. Specifically, extension of our contract on the large air tanker, adding a second large air tanker, also supporting the addition of 2 additional Type 1 helicopters, rapid response, large and fastest response to wildland fires, carrying hundreds of gallons of flame retardant water. And it's critical to mention we will be competing with other states on these contracts, and we're doing everything we can to secure additional capacity in the short, the medium, and long term. Next month is Wildfire Awareness Month. We're partnering with the Colorado State Forest Service, Colorado Division of Fire Prevention, U.S. Forest Service Rocky Mountain region on an extensive campaign to educate and inform Coloradans about reducing fire risk. The reality is the majority of fires are caused by humans, whether that's a dragging trailer chain or spark, could be failure to put out a campfire, or even a cigarette. And therefore, we all have a role in preventing that, in learning how to enjoy our public lands safely, given the increased risk. I'm confident that with Colorado's efforts to prepare, we're going to all need to work together. And that, as we know, wildfires do not recognize jurisdictional boundaries between states, between counties. A single wildfire often crosses private land, county land, federal land, sometimes tribal lands, and it's a threat to all communities across all landscapes. That's why collaboration, bringing everybody together, is key, and leveraging our federal partnerships to make sure that all available resources can rapidly respond to improve our effectiveness and capacity. The 2022 Wildfire Preparedness Plan is part of our holistic approach to wildfire management that includes suppression and response, fuels and forest management, mitigation of all types, mitigation at the home level, the community level, and at the forest level. And this plan is based on lessons learned from previous years, and really making sure we use every tool to leave no stone unturned when it comes to prevention, mitigation, response capacity, and capabilities here in Colorado. With that, we'll turn it over to Colorado Department of Public Safety Director Stan Hilke.
Hello everybody, my name is Stan Hilke, Executive Director of the Department of Public Safety. Today we held the Governor's annual wildfire briefing. We just came from that. In that wildfire briefing that we have every year, we bring in all of our partners, and wildland fire problem is not anything that any one of us can tackle and be successful with. We have our local partners, starting with local volunteers, state firefighters, the county sheriffs of Colorado, the U.S. Forest Service, the State Forest Service, the BLM, and others that are involved in this effort, and that we endeavor to make sure that we have the proper relationship to put the power of all of our efforts together to make an effective fight against wildland fire in Colorado. And again, while I may be talking a little bit more about suppression today, the mitigation efforts that our department, that the federal agencies and the local agencies involved in are critically important and part of the long-term effort of what we need to be doing. I have nearly 40 years of experience in public safety. I grew up in western Colorado, northwest Colorado, was a western Colorado sheriff. And in those days, I remember the wildland fire problem was burning in wide swaths of public land without a lot of encroachment by businesses and homes. As you know now, today, things are much different. Half of our state lives in a wildland-urban interface, and that presents some serious challenges when you put together the issue of climate change, drought conditions, and the like. We work year-round to try to mitigate that. As the governor said, we used to have a fire season break, and we could gather up and train and get ready for the next fire season. There is no break anymore. As you know, the Marshall Fire occurred in the last days of December here, and it's the most devastating fire in our state history. Today, earlier, at the Capitol, we did announce that the Senate President, Steve Finberg, talked about the different elements of bills that are going to be introduced in the days to come that deal with climate change, but one of the most exciting in the realm of fire suppression and support is that we're going to get an extra $15 million to add to the state's aviation resources that we already have on contract. And as the governor said, we're going to be competing with other states there, but we endeavor to try to make sure that we extend the contract that we have for the exclusive use large air tanker in Colorado, add another air tanker if we can, and add some helicopters. This is all on top of what we do already, and I'm sure you'll hear more about that from Chief Morgan in a second. We want to make sure that we also implement the number one recommendation that came out of the Colorado Fire Commission, which is to stand up a state dispatch center for all of these resources to make sure that we have year-round capability to coordinate these resources across our entire state. The FPC Director, Chief Mike Morgan, is going to talk more about that. Safety is a priority for every one of our programs, from the most basic training to the most complex operations. We want to make sure that we continue to pay attention to the safety of all of our first responders and support them. That's part of Chief Morgan's shop, is training firefighters throughout the state. We need people who live, work, and play in Colorado to adopt the ownership and responsibility for this problem as much as those of us that are standing here today. As has been said previously, most of our wildland fires, the fires in the state of Colorado, have human involvement of some kind, human cause or human involvement. We need people to take responsibility for that, to try to make sure that we keep our fire starts at a very minimum. It's been said before, but I want to emphasize it again. The problem is growing, and it is growing in the most recent years. If you look at the 20 of the state's largest fires, they all have occurred since 2002. 3/4 of those fires have taken place in the last decade, And just since 2018, we've experienced 9 of the state's top 20 fires. That tells you how it's progressing. Today, we're standing here on probably one of the worst fire danger days that we've had in a decade. And you'll hear from Chief Morgan in a minute, but we've done some things just today to try to be prepared for that, particularly given the fact that we know that we might have a wind event. And as much as we love to have aircraft available, sometimes the wind will prevent us from putting aircraft available. We have pre-positioned strike teams and engines and firefighters around the state at strategic locations to try to be ready in the event that we need them as well. We want everybody to take extra precaution before venturing out and being careful of anything that can start a fire. The governor mentioned just the smallest spark could be a big problem. We've had issues with people who have done agriculture burning or barbecuing or having a crash of a drone or causing sparks with trailer chains or chainsaw. All of these kinds of things need to be thought out when we use it, and we hope that the media that's here today will help us amplify those messages. We also want to encourage the public to be prepared, to reach out and get connected to the alert systems that happen in every county and every place. Make sure that you opt into those programs to get the latest details so that you know if your area is at a threat of wildfire and if you are under evacuation. Please connect with your local county emergency management, your local county sheriff's office, your local fire departments to make sure that you're connected there as well. And when fires do occur, we please ask that you be aware and respect the local public safety area and try to avoid the area and the road closures to make sure that it makes the job easier for the firefighters and the public safety professionals that are there and on scene. Our motto of the Department of Public Safety is safer together, Together we believe that we can reduce the danger and the lives, to the lives and the property of wildfire, but we cannot do it alone. We have many partners here that we are proud to be working with, but the biggest partner that we really hope will help us amplify the message to you today is the public. We need to prevent those fires, we need to prevent accidental starts, and we need to make sure that you are prepared and ready. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Chief Mike Morgan, the Director of the Division of Fire Prevention Control within the Department of Public Safety. Mike.
Thank you, Director Hilke, and thanks everybody for being here today. As was mentioned, my name is Mike Morgan. I'm the Director of the Colorado Division of Fire Prevention and Control. And I think to the points that are being made in the statements by the Governor and Director Hilke is everybody needs to do their part to prevent these fires from occurring. We know they're going to occur. Do your part to minimize that risk. As was kind of mentioned, there was a lot of announcements made this morning, and I'm going to get into those here in a few minutes and what that means for us and our preparedness plan for 2022. That plan will be released. It's available on our website today. You can look at that. But what you will see is probably not that surprising to you as it relates to what the predictions are for the coming fire season. I want to frame this a little bit to make everybody kind of understand that in the past 10 years, the average number of wildfires in the state of Colorado is 5,507. 5,507 fires on average per year, burning 221,000 acres. That's the 10-year average. Last year alone, there were 6,709 wildland fires reported in the state of Colorado. The local partners that we have, the people in this room that respond to those, we catch most of those fires before they become news events costing millions, if not billions of dollars in damage. So the effectiveness of our preparedness and our partnerships to do this across all levels of government are critical, and I want to thank all of our partners for being here today to help us to solve this problem, which is going to be yet another very challenging fire season or fire year in the state of Colorado. Right now, above average temperatures and below average precipitation are predicted across the state through June. We know that we're experiencing one of the most extreme fire days we've seen in over a decade up here on the front range of Colorado. As this season progresses through the year, the drought conditions and the high likelihood of large fires will travel across the southern half of the state to the western slope, It will travel up the west slope. Longer term predictions are that there's some potential for monsoonal moistures later in June on the western slope of Colorado to maybe give us a little reprieve on that side. The current forecasts are that the front range will go into drought conditions, extreme conditions going into July. So the season is not looking wonderful for us, but I do get the announcements from today, and the thanks to Governor Polis, Senator President Pinberg on the things that they're doing. I want to start by framing this with wanted fire versus unwanted fire. I think that's something we need to debate quite a bit. We all know that fire is part of the ecosystem, and the fire at the right time, right place, right conditions, that's a good thing, right? You also have to have the right resources available. What I'm describing to you is to tell you that given the current forecast, our opportunities to use firearms as a tool, those opportunities are going to be few and far between. What I'm going to talk about a lot today in our preparedness plan is unwanted fires. And the strategy for Colorado for unwanted fires is fairly simple, if you will. It is early detection and aggressive initial attack. Get the support to the local firefighters on the ground, keep these fires from getting named and being multi-day or multi-month events. That is our strategy. Our priorities have been and will remain public and firefighter safety, incident stabilization, property conservation, endangered species and environmental impacts, and then resource benefit. So we will use fire for resource benefit when conditions are right. We think those opportunities are likely to be more this year. Early detection, multi-mission aircraft out here. I want you to take a close look at that. That's a program we implemented in 2015. That aircraft is an early detection intelligence aircraft. Since we brought that aircraft on, we've detected over 600 fires that nobody knew about. Latitude, longitude was given to the local response agency. The fire was put out. It didn't get a name, didn't make the news. Those are the fires that we were talking about. We want to get those out. We also use a fire guard program as a national asset with our partnerships with Colorado National Guard to provide additional early detection capabilities and technology. Our model is spend a few dollars today, save millions tomorrow. And that's the way we're leading into this program and our problem. We also, as Director Hilke mentioned, we have developed a preparedness level system. Our federal partners for years have had a preparedness level from 1 through 5, with 1 being the lowest fire danger to 5 being extreme fire danger. We've adapted that into the state of Colorado so that we can move resources around the state based upon those preparedness levels. As Director Hilke mentioned today, we brought over strike team from the western, 2 strike teams that actually from the western slope, 1 in northeast Colorado, 1 will be in southeast Colorado to help support those local agencies. We've moved our helicopter assets over to this side of the hill, as well as 1 of the multi-mission aircraft. There's 2 of those. 1 of those is down in Mesa County. In case the wind becomes challenging over here for it to fly, we'll be able to launch one from that side of the hill. So, single engine air tankers seats also out here for display. We have 2 of those available to us. One was brought on in February, 1 was brought on in March. So we have 2 of those available. Type 2 helicopters, 1 in February, 1 in March. So we have 2 of those. As I mentioned, the large air tanker will come on. We're moving that back a month. That will come on in May. And the big news again, as Governor Polis mentioned, is that our intent and with the support of the governor's office and President Pinberg is that we will bring on a second large air tanker for part of the season and 2 additional Type 1 helicopters. That would bring our total fleet, if we can find a contract, and as Director Hilke mentioned, that would be 3 Type 1 helicopters, 2 Type 2 helicopters, 2 large air tankers, 2 multi-mission aircraft, and 2 single engine air tankers. We also have call and needed contracts with multiple other aviation assets. And really all of that is to support the ground crews to keep fires small so the folks that you see around the room standing next to the engines can do their job safely to get the fires put out. Probably one of the most exciting news for me, if you will, is I've been in the fire service much like Director Hilke. I've been in this business for almost 40 years. The funding to build a statewide fire resource mobilization dispatch center is a huge step forward for us, and we're super excited about that. And for those of you in this room who understand this, that we're seeing with the fire problems we're seeing in Colorado, we're seeing that local public safety answering point, or PSAP 911 center, they're overwhelmed early and more often because of these large fires. What this allows us to do is to build a statewide dispatch center in partnership with our federal partners, so we'll be working with them to dispatch aviation assets as well as regional and statewide mutual aid system for fire-based resources. That is beyond just wildfire, but for all fire-based resources. So with that, I believe I will wrap it up and hand it back to the governor and open it up for any questions.
Thank you. We also have representatives of the federal government and others here for your questions. We'll be happy to take some questions.
One question, Governor, what's the status of the Firehawk that the state talked about a few months ago?
Yeah, the helicopter delivery is expected in early May. It will then be brought to the location in Colorado that converts it to a Firehawk. We expect a completion and delivery in November or December of the Firehawk. We have, with the additional resources today, we just went over, so in the fire preparedness meeting, there's a number of different resources available, BLM, Forest Service, etc. The additional resources today offer 2 additional Type 1 helicopters for this season. So that is an important classification of helicopter. It's really the first rapid response. They're able to fly in a much wider variety of conditions than some of our aircraft, and they're very effective at early stages of preventing fires from becoming major events.
So just to clarify with regard to the Firehawk, delivery in May, but it needs to be outfitted still and it won't be available this firefighting season?
I think it's ahead of schedule. It was going to be for before May of next year, but we are expecting it will be completed by November, December of this year.
Is the buying of aircraft also getting the exclusive lease on things part of the bigger picture that includes ground people that we are going fast attack? Is that a new strategy or the way we're approaching it?
Yeah, so there's such demand for the assets during fire season. And in real time, whoever controls them really can have a major impact. So, there could be fires in Idaho, Oregon, California, here. And that's why it's so important to be in a controlling position with regard to these leases. So that's what we will be securing. We have some already on board, 1 air tanker, adding a second, as well as a helicopter in a sense.
And we've gone into kind of a mode of year-round, but it's a drier, driest that we look at each year. It sounds like we're prepped as far as the state, but I was talking to a firefighter yesterday who said, we need the public to think beyond, it's somebody throwing out a cigarette butt. They said it needs to be a proactive, am I throwing sparks from a chains, or how urgent are we looking at this year?
Yeah, it's really all of the above, right? So there's a lot of attention to fire bans where and when they exist, but it's about a lot more than that. It's about chains on tires, it's about lawn equipment, it's about barbecues, it's about cigarettes. So all of these types of activities can have caused human-caused fires here in Colorado. So we want people to be fire smart as they live their lives, not just while they are, for instance, camping and not using a camping fire or in an area where it's not banned, making sure it's securely put out. Yes, check that box, but there's a lot more to the individual responsibility side than just that.
And who does that apply to, Governor? Because obviously, we saw the Marshall Fire. It was suburban Denver, essentially. Are you talking to everyone along the Front Range when you say be vigilant when it comes to those things that could potentially?
It truly means be vigilant, not just when you're camping in the backcountry, in your neighborhood, in your open space near your home. This large suburban wildfire affected entire subdevelopments, residential subdevelopments. So be thoughtful about working with us on subdevelopment, perimeter defense, home perimeter defense. If there's fuel near your home, it'd be an excellent time to be able to reduce your risk by removing those potential sources of danger to your home. and in addition, taking on that individual responsibility to be fire smart.
As you talk about individual responsibility, what happens to the people who are caught actually starting wildfires? For example, the in-car fire was said to be started by someone. What will happen from there? Are there any measures, or is there anything in place for something like that happens?
Thank you. Good question. Certainly, we local fire departments, local agencies, police, and sheriff's offices help in this. That's sort of the first line for cause and origin investigations. And there are criminal penalties for criminal activity with regards to starting fire. And we rely hard on our locals to do that. We are available to assist them when requested. The Forest Service and the BLM also have cause and origin investigation elements within their pieces as well. And when somebody becomes criminally liable, they can be held accountable through the criminal justice process.
So what will happen? Let's say if you do get caught, you are held liable, then what happens to that person? What type of punitive measures are there for them?
That's highly speculative, based on the charge and the type of crime, the resources that were burned. I mean, as you know, there was an individual held accountable in the Hayman fire, which was millions and millions and millions of dollars. And obviously, restitution is not an option for significant amount at that time. But that person did incarceration time plus pretty lengthy, I understand, supervision post incarceration, and the like. So those are the types of things that can happen on large fires. Depends on the size of the fire, depends on the type of class of crime that's under discharge.
I just think the biggest thing is that if I lost my home and I know that someone started it, I would want to know they would pay, right? There would be something that would actually happen to them. And I understand that it's dependent on the size, but what's just something that's going to prevent this, to make people think twice about going and having that barbecue, going and flicking that cigarette butt? What's something that's going to happen for them to make sure that they don't do that?
Well, I will just say this, that it all depends on the carelessness, the criminal activity, etc. Accidents do happen, legitimate accidents do happen. That's one of the reasons that we have insurance and the like as well. So yes, there are opportunities for people to be held accountable if they're negligent, if they're careless, if they're criminally acting, etc. But there are scenarios as well where there's accidental, fires or whatever, where somebody's less likely to get held accountable in that way.
May I ask about the strike?
Strategy surrounding forecast. Mr. Murray, you mentioned that forecast call for the extreme drought for July. A lot of people, of course, live in the department. I'm just wondering if there's a strategy based on that forecast. Positioning things fighting fires.
Great question. I think the answer to it, as I described earlier, preparedness level system. The fire dangers in Colorado vary day by day, right? And we've got places of the state that are still under snow, while other places are seeing the most extreme fire behavior we've ever seen. Putting a preparedness level system together where we're able to pre-position resources to different parts of the state based upon what we predict for fire behavior like today, the things that we're doing. Now that is not a one-off, if you will. It's new to the state of Colorado. We've been developing that over the last couple of years. So the resources I was speaking of, we will be doing that based upon what's happening anywhere across the state for this fire season and for future fire seasons. In addition, that dispatch center that I alluded to, partnering with our federal partners, allows us to dispatch aviation assets quicker through on the shoulder season fires, if you will, those times of years where we historically have not seen those. Our contracts are much longer contracts than what a lot of our federal partners have often. So it provides this additional depth as well as the ability to move those resources around in what we call surge capacity, mutual aid capacity, to be better prepared to respond to that.
In a place facility, and you have this plan and search for fires, are we going to be out every day looking for fires? I just was wondering how aggressive that is.
So we've got systems that are monitored 24/7 that do early detection work for us 24/7. We also have, as I mentioned, multi-mission aircraft, and the dispatch of multi-mission aircraft happens in a couple of different ways. Our Center of Excellence, which is here today, Director Ben Miller is here. You can talk to him Colorado is leaning in hard on technology because technology will make the difference in that early detection. So programs like COTAC, the Fire Guard program, the cameras and different things that are on that multi-mission aircraft, and we're leveraging that kind of technology every day to be better at what we do.
Can you tell us?
Oh, yes, and to your point, Director Cook, the one we mentioned, firebands. We get a lot of questions to us always about statewide firebands. As I kind of mentioned earlier, Colorado is very diverse. You've got elevations from 14,000 foot to 2,500 foot, where you can have 4 foot of snow in one spot while you've got red flag warnings in another spot. We hesitate to try to take a statewide approach to firebands. We've done that in the past when conditions dictate, but what we really rely on is the local fire chiefs and local sheriffs, local county commissioners to make those decisions based upon their local community needs. So the specific questions and those types of things, a lot of times we get those questions, but they're best deferred to your sheriff or your fire chief or your county commissioners, because we try to keep that local control as much as we can because of the huge diversity in the state.
For today's extreme conditions, can you tell us where those strike team locations are, specifically southeast Colorado, why there, and what makes up a strike team?
Great question. There is one in the Lakewood area, and I think one in the Pueblo area. I'm phoning a friend over there, Chief Jones, so he's shaking his head like this. So the other one is in the Pueblo area. And a strike team is 5 or more similar types of engines with leadership. It would likely be wildland engines because of the conditions, with a supervisor that are rapidly deployed and pre-positioned in an area. I mean, we know local fire agencies are going to be busier than they normally are. We also know they're going to be running their routine medical calls and fire alarms and structure fires and all those other things. So it brings additional resources into a region to allow for that surge in calls, if you will, as well as additional resources if something was to get larger to focus on trying to keep it small.
Mike, I'm trying to gauge your true level of concern. You said the outlook doesn't look great. Are you sugarcoating that for us a little bit, or what's your true? I mean, you can lay it on us.
I've been in this business for 36 years, and the only absolute is there are no absolutes. I've learned that early on. What I do know is that in watching, I responded to the South Canyon fire in 1994, where 14 firefighters were killed outside of Lemon Springs. I responded to it after the fire had blown up from rifle. In the back of the ambulance, there were a report of 40 firefighters missing. And I saw what I thought would be the most catastrophic event of my life, with 14 fatalities. And that fire was just over 2,000 acres. So I thought that was huge, and it did used to be huge. And then I look at things like the East Troublesome fire, where it burns 25 miles overnight. So I'm not trying to be evasive. I know our risk is significant this year, and people have to do their part. And I applaud the governor and the President Senator Finberg and the leadership of the state for leaning in hard. We're leaning in harder than we ever have been able to do a better job with, again, unwanted fires, early detection, aggressive initial attack, and supporting the boots on the ground, the firefighters that are standing here and sitting over here, getting them the resources and the assets that they need quicker. I think the other thing I wanted to kind of mention, that Governor Polis mentioned, is about operational control. Historically, we've relied on our federal partners for all the aviation assets to help support us and the firefighters on the ground and getting their job done, which meant that we were competing with 19 states across the West. I've been on fires, I can't tell you how many times in that 36 years where I was like, we really need a large air tanker, or we really need a Type 1 helicopter to have the response back to me to go, the closest one is in Arizona, and they're not releasing it. It's not available to you. And as a local fire chief or a local incident commander, that makes you panic. You feel pretty helpless in that moment. So to know that we're leaning in hard, where the goal, again, has been mentioned, what we're trying to accomplish with this would be to build a dispatch center for rapid mobilization of fire-based resources, have extended contracts for a large air tanker, a second large air tanker on a 4-month contract 3 Type 1 helicopters, 2 Type 2 helicopters, 2 single engine air tankers, plus those assets that our federal partners bring to the table. It's 44 large air tankers nationally. Those are the ones we're competing for 19 states. But to know that we have those assets available to us here is critical to that success. So again, I'm not trying to be evasive. I feel good about how prepared we are, but I know we are going to have some tough days and some bad days, and kind of that really relies on, as the governor said and Director Hilke said, and I tried to allude to when I said we're the Division of Fire Prevention and Control. We want to prevent the fire first, and we're going to do our dangest to put it out as quick as we can when it's threatening lives and property, and we're better prepared to do that than we ever have in the past.
Just to follow up on that, Mike, what do you mean by leaning in hard? And I mean, can you give us some I mean, obviously we see the assets around here, but do you feel better prepared than ever before? And you know, are you feeling ill prepared in some ways?
I'm going to turn to Director Hilke and say, but I absolutely do feel better prepared than we ever have. I know that historically, this is talking decades ago, that the traditional model of state or federal response to these events was to show up after the fire was big and show up with a checkbook. And we're providing enhanced state assistance with resources and support that are free of charge to local governments to keep those fires small before they get big.
You just stole my thunder.
Sorry, boss.
I was going to give you the perspective of a sheriff. I was a sheriff in Grand Junction, Colorado, Mesa County, and it was the practice of the state, and where the fire had to burn over the ridge before we usually got help. And these days, with our enhanced state assistance and the ability to rapidly respond and our value of aggressive initial attack, we're not letting that happen anymore as much as possible. So, leaning in hard means all of these assets that we just listed and rattled off that are exclusive to Colorado, which is amazing. And we never used to have that. We had to rely on just the federal resources. Plus the pre-positioning of ground troops, just like we talked about strike teams. Strike teams come with people. That has worked. And then we've worked hard with the Fire Chiefs Association in the state as well about how we bring in mutual aid rapidly. I remember on the East Troublesome fire, when it burned over the Continental Divide and started to head down to Estes Park, there were dozens of engines in structure protection efforts, in the Estes Park. Those are the kinds of leaning efforts that we're talking about, and I think those are the kinds of efforts that make us more successful.
Any additional questions?
Thank you all so much for joining us.